to the NXT Podcast, your home for weekly NXT reviews and insight.
The beautiful part of NXT is that when one dream ends, another dream begins.
Find all of your NXT news, recaps, and analysis right here. So with that being said, we only have one question for you.
Are you ready?
We thought so. Let's get the show started right now.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the NXT Podcast. As always, I am your host. My name is Zachary Smith. I am overjoyed to be with you here again this week to talk about NXT from yesterday, as I am recording this presently. Now, we're coming off of New Year's Evil. The AEW isn't going to have a big show without us doing something edition. So that was a great show that we got to talk about. Got to talk about some fun stuff before that. So we are heading into more kind of a setup period, and we have the Dusty Tag Team Classic, which has been a great tournament for NXT, and it spawned a lot of great matches. Samoa Joe and Finn Balor's rivalry really started after they won that, I believe, initial tag tournament for the Dusty Classic. So, with Dusty Rhodes meaning so much to NXT, running promo class, and you listen to anybody from NXT talk about him, he's one of the biggest influences on their career, not only for what he did in the ring and on the microphone and in interviews, but for what he did for them as professionals. So it's really cool to be able to see him kind of remembered kind of in action with this tag tournament. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. Now, as you may or may not know, you can always find me on Twitter. I am at ZachNXT. That's at ZACHNXT. We're always talking about wrestling, other fun stuff over there, trying to process everything going on as best we can. We try and get through it with humor. So if you want to join me in doing that over there, again, at ZACHNXT is the place to go. Now, generally, as you know, we talk about the news and the notes, stuff that's going on in wrestling. I didn't get to do that last week because there was, frankly, more important things going on. But this week we have a couple of things to talk about, a couple things that are going on right now. One thing that has been going on for a long time, and I didn't feel good about talking about it until now when I've kind of fully processed everything. So first, we're going to kind of talk about a couple things that are going on now, and of course we're going to talk about WWE's initiative and commitment to putting their young superstars in the best positions and having them in marquee matches and a less reliance on older stars who can't get it done anymore. Psych, just kidding, they did the opposite. So, on Raw, we had a couple super fun things happen. Drew McIntyre got COVID, and he said that he is feeling okay, but obviously COVID is nothing to mess with. As somebody who works in a hospital, I can assure you it's nothing to be taken lightly. And so, because he was out, we had to make a few changes to the show. One of the changes we made was Randy Orton needed somebody to go against in the WWE classic style of we're going to start a match with two people, which isn't actually important. It's really just set up for an angle that we're doing. And the person that they ended up using for that was none other than Triple H. Now, I honestly, off the top of my head, cannot remember the last time Triple H wrestled. I didn't know if he was done wrestling and was just going to focus on NXT and NXT UK and all that, but he did come back. He was interrupted by Randy Orton, and they set up a match later on Raw. Now, that would be cool, except that Triple H is an older guy. Randy's an older guy. That's your probably main event segment that features no new talent you're trying to get over. Also, it clearly wasn't planned because Triple H didn't have time to put it nicely, physically prepare, if you catch my meaning. And so Triple H wrestled in a black t-shirt. And I am not here to make fun of Triple H. I am just here to say that it is very weird, having watched Triple H for so long, seeing him wrestle in a shirt. It's just something that I have never seen, and it was very weird to see. And obviously, their match went just a few minutes before it was interrupted, as Randy seems like he's going to be going off with The Fiend. So that's cool. You really want to highlight your new guys. The other way to highlight your up-and-comers is to put them in a championship program. And as we know, our WWE champion is none other than Drew McIntyre. If not for Roman Reigns, he would probably be the best champion that we have. There's been a bit of Drew is not that good because he's now being compared to Roman Reigns. I would like to say for the record, that doesn't seem fair because Roman has a very cool gimmick and they kind of just put Drew out there to be the babyface or good guy champion, but also Roman's getting much more interesting things to do. And in that vein, instead of Drew working with somebody who is either a young up-and-comer or somebody that on the roster that they are trying to get over or put in a highlight spot, the Royal Rumble's going to be coming up, and the way that we decided to make Drew McIntyre's WWE title reign interesting is that, one, Goldberg's back. I am sure that there are people that were excited and were waiting for Goldberg to come back. I can tell you two things. I can tell you I wasn't one of them, and I can tell you I quite literally did not see anybody that was one of them. Goldberg's return the first time was fine, and then his matches with Brock Lesnar were pretty cool because they were very fast, they were car crashes, and they got out of there. The thing about Goldberg that is important is that he's not good. And when I say he's not good, he's not a good talker. He has his thing, he has his catchphrases, he says. He has his kind of cadence, and he's just not good at it. Also, the thing you need to remember is he's not a good wrestler. And some guys, like The Undertaker, for example, aren't necessarily great workers anymore because The Undertaker has been a wrestler for a very, very long time, and he has put his body through hell and back. And so, naturally, you're not going to be your young whippersnapper self. The problem is, Goldberg was thrown in when he first came to the power plant, which was WCW's basically performance center, and they liked his look and his intensity, and he was an Atlanta Falcons player, I believe, and so they threw him into WCW television, and he went on his win streak, so on and so forth. So obviously, a guy in that situation is not going to be a good worker, and I'm not the kind of guy that you need to be a 5-star worker in every match. I'm certainly not that guy. I think that is overblown, and I think that you could be a very good worker without being a great technical worker. But when he debuted, he was very new, he was very green, he wasn't very good. I don't fault him at all for that. What I do fault him for is that in the years and years and years and years through WCW, coming to WWE, leaving after WrestleMania against Brock Lesnar in that match that if you haven't seen with Brock Lesnar, you need to go watch, because it's the opposite of Hogan Rock in that the fans just decided, nope, we're not doing it today. And I've never seen a crowd get to 2 wrestlers in a match more than that match. But through all that time, Goldberg decided that the only thing he needed to do was the spear, the jackhammer, be big and intimidating looking, and that was it. And so he's best suited for very short matches, because he cannot have even medium-length matches, forget long matches, and really forget good matches. So in all that time, Goldberg never felt it necessary to improve at all or add significantly more moves to his arsenal. If anything, he took away some, and he's good at the spear. He can't do the jackhammer consistently anymore. Point being, Mr. Goldberg is not good, and certainly I do not think is the draw that WWE thinks that he is. He trafficked a lot in nostalgia and the I'm here for my kid and for the kids narrative that, while fine and dandy, and I don't doubt that had something to do with it, I think it's also the incredible amount of money that he is making, despite all the logic that it does not compute there. So all of that is to say that that gentleman is going to likely be challenging Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship at the Royal Rumble. Now, heads up, this is going to go one of two ways. Either this is going to be a very bad match. Drew McIntyre is a very good wrestler, but I've seen Goldberg in the ring with very good wrestlers. He was in there with Bret Hart, who, as a technician, is probably one of, if not the best ever, had a bad match and then gave Bret Hart a concussion on a kick because he doesn't know how to do moves that look like they hurt without hurting. So it's either going to be Goldberg struggling his way through a bad match, or it's going to be a very fast car crash. And a very fast car crash can be very fun. It worked with Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. The problem is we've seen it. So it's either going to be a very bad match, or, which doesn't help Drew at all, by the way. It just hurts Drew because he's in the least interesting program you could have put him in. But also, he's going to have a bad match, and it's not going to be his fault. Or they're going to have an okay, quick match that we've seen before. So either way, Drew's kind of screwed, and that doesn't seem like an ideal position to put your WWE champion. Once again, really good that they're giving the new guys a chance. And then you wonder why people don't take new guys seriously, because they know that people are just going to come in who are legends in traffic and nostalgia and have success. And heaven help them if Goldberg actually wins the WWE title again. People hated it when he won it from Kevin Owens. I think that they'll hate it even more if he beats Drew McIntyre, which he won't, I don't think, but it's Goldberg, so you never know. He beat The Fiend. It was bad. It's all bad. Nothing good happens when Goldberg's around, and so here we are. Mustafa Ali kind of put it best when he was on, I believe it's Raw Talk after Raw, where he basically said that the legends paved the way. They blazed the trail and they set the path. But when do I get to walk on that path? That's a really good point. The legends blazed the trail. They gave their blood, sweat, and tears, time away from their family, their bodies, in some people's cases, their lives and livelihoods after, their mind. And I sincerely, as wrestling fans, that is why we hold them in such high regard. But at the same time, you have to know kind of when to let that go. They had a Legends Raw where everybody was around, and things like that are okay for nostalgia. I would argue it's not a great idea to have a bunch of old dudes hanging out at a show under the auspice of a company that does not seem to be very good at containing COVID, and in fact is probably one of the worst places you could be, especially considering Drew was in a segment with Hulk Hogan, which, one, still don't love that I see Hulk Hogan on my TV screen. Would love to stop seeing that. But two, Hulk Hogan's an old dude, and Drew just tested positive for COVID, so that could be bad. But then Legends come back, and problem is they put them with new guys because they need young guys that can bump for them and sell and make them look good. But then the old dudes win. So if Goldberg comes back in a much more limited capacity than he has been before, and he loses to an up-and-comer, that adds credibility to them. Take Kevin Owens, for example. If Kevin Owens had beaten Goldberg to retain his title, that would have given him a lot of momentum and would have helped him. Kevin Owens losing to Goldberg just pisses off the fans. It makes the Universal title look stupid and like a joke, and it demotes Kevin Owens because he couldn't beat the old dude. It's not a legend and a monster that came through and beat him. It's just this old dude that came and beat him. Same thing with The Fiend. So, I don't know. Maybe stop? Maybe don't do that ever, and maybe especially don't do it during a pandemic when you have demonstrated a complete lack of ability or want, I'm not sure, to contain it or have precautions, and you really only take precautions when you're called out. The last thing is good old JR, Jim Ross. JR kind of made the news a while back because he was doing the thing he does now where he complains about how people work in AEW and their style of working. And basically it boils down to they do a lot of moves that don't mean anything and they don't sell. I take issue with the moves not meaning anything because it's not that they don't mean anything, it's that they don't mean what you want them to mean. I'm a big fan of the AEW style. I'm a big fan of the old school style where you sell a lot. But if I hit 1,000,000 moves on somebody, there are people that like that. There are people that hate that. But to unilaterally say, if you do a bunch of moves and don't sell, that's not wrestling. All of this isn't real, and nobody in the world who's watching it believes it's a real fight. So A, it's not a big deal. B, we're never getting back to the days of kayfabe and this is all serious and you have to pretend that this is really a fight. But the important thing is that I like when people do a lot of moves, but I don't go to people who say they need to sell more and say, oh, you're just an old curmudgeon who's out of touch. I respect everybody's style. And the problem is JR doesn't. And in between calling matches, if he doesn't sound like he's asleep, JR used to, if a match was bad, say that the match was bowling shoe ugly. And that was JR's kind of code for, yep, I also know this is a bad match. JR has always been very good at, number one, he's the best announcer ever. But he's always been very good at letting you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I know this is bad too, to distance himself from it a bit. And he talked about this on his podcast with Conrad, and I have no problem with him talking about the product and his problems with it on the podcast. I would argue that if on this podcast I started just complaining about the way that my company I work for does things constantly and basically saying that everything they're doing doesn't mean anything because they're not doing it the way I want them to, I would argue that makes me not a good employee. But he's certainly free to do whatever he wants on his podcast. Now, when he is calling a show in AEW, you can hear it in his voice that he has a disdain for moves and not selling, and for super kicks. He had a whole thing about people slapping their leg when they hit a move and laughing at how stupid that is, not realizing that one, it makes a better sound than the nothing it would make if they didn't. And also, this is an industry that's built on two guys getting in a ring in their underwear and wrestling each other on a mat, so let's maybe not act like leg slapping is the most ridiculous thing that happens. You can hear the disdain in his voice, and I think that's a problem. And again, JR is probably the best announcer for wrestling and one of the best announcers ever, but JR is an older guy. He's like a pitcher in baseball who used to throw 100 miles an hour regularly. Now, he's older. Has some tricks up his sleeve. And the thing is, he can still pitch 100 sometimes if he's into it. But the point is not for you to be excited just when you see something you like. The point of an announcer is to also get me excited about it. And one of the reasons I don't generally listen to the commentary is that I don't want to hear an older dude who doesn't have his fastball all the time anymore tell me, sometimes without telling me, that this isn't real wrestling. It just kind of all adds up to like maybe not the best employee. And if I lost my 100-mile-an-hour fastball, I maybe wouldn't openly exclaim my disdain for my team when I'm not necessarily contributing that much. I'll put it this way. When JR's good, he's the best ever. But if we took JR's name off of it, and this announcer's name was John Smith, and all of this had happened, and he sometimes wasn't a very good announcer, and he was good sometimes, he would either be taken off to get some coaching, or people would be calling for that person to be fired. And I'm not saying he should be, but I'm saying if you're maybe not pitching a fastball anymore, maybe don't openly be hostile to the people who are putting their bodies on the line when your job is to just call it, and you can't even seem to do that without an attitude. Maybe, just maybe. But listen, we're here. It's the NXT podcast. We're here at the Capitol Wrestling Center. And to start off the show, we get a recap of New Year's Evil from last week, a video package going over a few of the things that happened. It reminds us that the Dusty Rhodes Classic is happening, and it starts tonight with 3 tag matches in our first round. We get great photos of Dusty Rhodes on the video boards and the trophy, and the, looks like, I don't know if they're silver, giant boots, I'm assuming based on a pair of Dusty Rhodes' actual boots, which is very cool. We're starting with Shotzi Blackheart coming out for her match first. Thank goodness she still has her tank, because as we recall, when she does not have a tank, she does not do well. Candice LeRae's out next with Indy Hartwell. This is a feud that technically has history. It's not very interesting history. but it's history, I guess. Like it's a feud that started a while ago, and it's kind of just going on and on, but not really for a reason. So it kind of feels like it's just they don't have anything else for them to do, so they keep putting them together. And, you know, that's fine to a degree. They have good matches together. They're both very interesting. But I'm hoping that this is kind of the last we're seeing of them facing off, and we kind of move on. It's just, I like them both as wrestlers. They have good matches, like I said, but it's really just kind of to set up, kind of reinforce Candice as a bad guy and establish the Gargano family. They call themselves The Way now, which is a weird, bad name, and the Gargano family was right there, and it was a better name. We have our match. Shotzi is on the top rope. She gets distracted by Indy Hartwell. She hits Indy Hartwell. In the meantime, Candice LeRae hits a spinning neck breaker from the top rope for the win. So, standard bad person wins because of help. This was definitely not their best match, but the finish was well done. It looked like it hurt a lot. I hadn't seen that finish a lot, so I'm always happy with that. Candice is posing. She's very happy with herself. She's a great bad guy. We go to commercial, and it's dark except for a spotlight on the NXT champion Finn Balor 1 week after defending his title successfully against Kyle O'Reilly. Finn says he is still the NXT champion. He says, I'll give Kyle credit. He said he's very good. He said he's even great, but he's not on my level. He stepped up, and just like TakeOver 31, he got put down. He points to his shirt. He says, I put this red X on my chest because I know I am the target. Said, whoever wants to come after me, just remember they stopped manufacturing the cloth I'm cut from. That was a pretty good line. That's a bar. He's then interrupted by Pete Dunne, who comes out with the NXT Tag Champions, Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. Easy to forget they're Tag Team Champions because we don't do a lot of tag team stuff. Pete Dunne says he knows full well what's next. He says, I knew someday it was going to come down to the two of us. The only reason you have the crown as the prince and that title is I haven't taken it yet. Dunne says he was told to wait in line, but he isn't waiting anymore. And they go to get in the ring, and Balor takes them out for a bit until he's overwhelmed by numbers and they start beating him down. Kyle O'Reilly runs in from the side, and he tries to help, but doesn't help at all, and so now they're both getting beaten up. So Roderick Strong and Adam Cole, two of the other members of Undisputed Era, come out, and they clear the ring. There's still no Bobby Fish, who's technically the fourth member of Undisputed Era. I don't know if he's hurt again or if he has something else going on. He misses a lot of these segments, and he has since the group formed, so it really barely feels like he's a part of the group, and it has been that way for a long time. Ring is cleared. Finn stares down Kyle O'Reilly in the Undisputed Era. He leaves the ring. It's an interesting segment. I'm not sure who we're setting up here, but I'm really looking forward to hopefully at some point Finn Balor and Pete Dunne, because I just think that would be a great match. So we come back, and it's Jake Atlas and Swerve Scott coming out. They're taking on a new team. They teased it. They had the blacked out figure that they usually do for mystery opponents, because we have a new team, MSK, just a mystery team in the Dusty Classic. First, though, we have the Grizzled Young Veterans. They made their debut in the Dusty Classic last year, and they're running down the fans as they come to the ring. There's 16 teams in this tournament. The winning team gets an NXT tag title match, which we have not had very many of. So the team that the Grizzled Young Veterans are facing got no entrance, and they said their name quickly once, so it seems like we know who's winning. And predictably, we do not have 16 tag teams that are established. 16 seems like a lot for a place that definitely does not have 16 teams. The other team was Everrise. You're welcome for me checking so that you'd know the name. The Grizzled Young Veterans very obviously win. So we have our next match, which is Swerve and Atlas, now coming out for the second Dusty Classic match. And now MSK comes out. MSK, again, a new team I haven't heard of before. They are a mystery, which means MSK is going to win. Sucks for Atlas and Swerve. Sorry, dudes. MSK look all right. They look cool. Their theme doesn't do it for me. Feels like a generic hard rock, almost metal, but not really stock music theme. It's not terrible. It just doesn't do it for me. They have a good match here. These are two really good... Swerve and Atlas are good guys to have in here because they're also both very, very good. MSK does pick up the win. They were very impressive in their debut. NXT needs more tag teams and some fresh blood, so these two could be big players in the scene. I don't think they're going to win the whole tournament, but this match was really good as a showcase for them and an introduction. And the tournament itself could be really good for them. Like, it's a really good way to debut a team. They can go pretty far in the tournament, put up a valiant effort against Adam Cole and Roderick Strong, say, later in the tournament and lose, but give them all that they can handle and then some. It's just tournaments are a really good place to establish people, and it seems like we're doing that with MSK. I'm going to save you some time. Scarlett's in a dark room with red smoke, with a skeleton on a table with tarot cards. She's looking at them. She talks about Karrion Kross having beaten Damian Priest, and then she talks about Finn Balor for a second in a very cryptic way that the goth kid in your high school would do because he thought he was cool. TikTok, they want to fight Finn Balor. I saved you a bunch of time. We didn't see Karrion Kross because why would we? He has his girlfriend do his talking for him because he's a big scary monster who's camera shy. Xia Li is out next with Boa and that creepy dude, I think it's a dude, that we first saw last week. I think it's a dude that wears a mask that kind of sort of looks like Zombie Sub-Zero in a chair on the entrance ramp the same way. Their entrance music is really cool. Their presentation's really cool. Her and Boa look really cool. They look serious. They look like they've gone through some stuff. Xia Li beats an enhancement talent with that same kick to the face as last week. She goes to get out of the ring. She's walking back up, and Sub-Zero holds his hand up, and she starts attacking the girl, starts walking back, and then Sub-Zero clenches his fist, and she goes back and starts beating the girl up more. So Xia Li is under the tutelage or spell or something of this master, or Zombie Sub-Zero, and her and Boa, and they're now much more serious and want to hurt people, and I'm good with it. Xia Li was not utilized super effectively before this, so this new character, I think, has legs. I don't know that. I think if Sub-Zero were to ever get in the ring, I don't think it would look as cool, because I think it's a lot because it's in the dark and Sub-Zero sitting in a chair. I think that helps a lot. I don't know if Boa's going to be wrestling or if he's just kind of muscle. But I'm excited to see kind of what they end up doing with this character and this super weird presentation. And you guys know one of my favorite things about wrestling is that it'd be really hard to explain to people. And it's one of those things that if my wife asked me what the hell's happening right now, I would have a really hard time explaining what was happening. And that's usually my favorite stuff. So I'm excited again to see what they kind of do with it. So We come back, and Undisputed Era are out for their match with Breezango. This should be a really good match. Adam Cole and Tyler Breeze both go to do a super kick at the same time, but because they did it at the same time, their kicks hit each other. That's a cool spot. Somewhere, JR squeezed his barbecue sauce too hard out of anger, because how dare you both do a super kick and not sell the leg, and you both look like you were about to slap your leg, which means it's not real wrestling, and there wasn't selling, so it's a garbage match, according to some folks. So this actually is an excellent match. These are two Breezangos, a very established tag team. Adam Cole and Roderick Strong aren't usually the ones that are a tag team. It's usually Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish, or some combination there. But Adam Cole and Roderick Strong have worked together before. Obviously, they're both in Undisputed Era. All four of these guys have chemistry both with their opponents and with each other as partners. So that makes for the best matches as it pertains to tag teams. So at the end, Fandango comes off of the top rope and Adam Cole super kicks him, and the son of a bee slaps his leg. And Adam Cole gets the 3 count on Fandango. So Undisputed Era is moving on. Good call. Obviously, Undisputed Era is going to go far in this tournament. I don't know if they'll win, but they'll go far. And Breezango are the former tag team champions. Again, easy to forget because we don't have a lot of title defenses. But, you know, Breezango's more of a comedy act. Not fully, but they're more of a comedy act, and they don't need establishing. They're already here, and there's not really a story you're telling with Breezango right now. They're just kind of around. So right choice with the selecting of opponents, because that was the best match that we have had tonight. So before that happened, Pete Dunne kind of sucker punch and took out Kyle O'Reilly at ringside. Kyle's really selling his jaw from last week when Finn targeted it a bit, and so Kyle's got a issue with his jaw, and Pete Dunne took advantage. So I'm a little confused because it seems as though we're either setting up for either Undisputed Era, Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, and I guess Bobby Fish, manager, if he shows up, against Pete Dunne, Oney Lorcan, and Danny Burch, or we're setting up for Pete Dunne versus Kyle O'Reilly, it seems like. And so either way, we're doing that thing where we send Pete Dunne into a different feud for the time being to keep him out of the title match, because otherwise he would just be fighting Finn Balor. Either way, though, it's kind of like keeping Pete Dunne away, presumably so that Karrion Kross can challenge Finn Balor. Those are the only two that are gunning for Finn right now. Obviously, I would much rather see Pete Dunne and Finn Balor for the title, but whatever. I'm sure the Karrion Kross build-up for that title match will just be so fantastic. I can't wait to see Scarlett a bunch talking cryptically and staring at people while Karrion Kross, the big monster, is too scared to come handle his own business. So that should be exciting. That should be fun. And I mean, I don't know if they're gonna want to beat Finn Balor, but on the other hand, Karrion Kross never really lost that title. And so on one hand, like for Karrion Kross the person, I would be very happy that he if he were to win the NXT title back. For Karrion Kross the character, I would be so very bored if he were the NXT champion, because I feel like it's just going to be a bunch of the same stuff we've already seen. And I don't know about you, but this character just does nothing for me. His entrance is cool. He does cool suplexes, and Scarlett is a really good character, and that's all I get out of it. And I don't necessarily want that to be my champion, because it's boring and you could do more with Finn. So hopefully, if we are doing Finn Balor Karrion Kross, Finn Balor retains the title and we can move on to the better match of Pete Dunne challenging Finn Balor. But we'll have to see. So next week, we're going to continue, presumably, the Dusty Classic and get more of those matches, see what other teams are going to be up as it pertains to next week. Hopefully we'll see Io Shirai on the show. She's probably at some point she's going to be taking on Mercedes Martinez. That's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to that build-up and that match. Easy to forget, we have a North America champion, Johnny Gargano. We'll have to see who he's going to be working with next as well. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire with our titles, and right now they're taking a little bit of a backstage because it is the Dusty Classic, and they take that very seriously, as they should. It's a big deal with everything that Dusty meant, especially to NXT. So I'm excited to see how it goes, and some of the NXT's classic moments have come from Dusty Classic scenarios, and the matches are always, at worst, really good. So I'm excited to see what happens. But let me know what you thought of the show. Did you think it was good? Did you think it was a good follow-up to New Year's Evil? What did you think about New Year's Evil? What are your thoughts on good old JR? I feel like that's one of those things that I've thought for a while now, but I think it's an unpopular wrestling opinion because everybody respects JR so much, as they should and as I do. But I've had that opinion for a long time, and it took me a while to formulate it, but here we are, and we're friends, we're pals, so I feel comfortable in this space telling you about it. Let me know what you think of good old JR and everything that's going on with him. Again, you can always find me on Twitter. I am at ZachNXT. Again, that's at ZACHNXT. You can hit me up over there. I'll get right back to you. Hell, your stuff might even end up on the show if you have any suggestions or topics you want to hear me talk about. Doesn't even have to be wrestling. We can talk about whatever. Last week's news and notes had nothing to do with wrestling. So let me know what you want to hear over there at ZachNXT. Otherwise, that has been the show, and so I will see you next week. I have been Zachary Smith. You have just been fantastic as always, and thank you for listening.